Activate Your Introvert, the weekly show to help leaders build performance by understanding introversion. In this week's show, Introvert Myth of the Week. Introverts suffer burnout more readily. Leadership Tip of the Week. Structuring tasks. Question of the Week. Are introverts less confident than extroverts? And a discussion with Vic O'Farrell. Vic, known as the Queen of Behaviours, makes the workplace work by putting people first. And she's a good friend of the show, and it's wonderful to welcome her back. There's been lots going on this week, hasn't there? Burning hot weather over the weekend, looking at some of the people on the beach, and of course, freedom. Freedom from gravity, in the space race, of course. Is there any other sort? Okay, there's also an introvert angle on freedom. I'm going to talk about freedom from structure. Have you ever thought about structured or unstructured tasks? My research shows that introverts tend to prefer a clear, structured set of tasks to something less defined. As a leader, help them create it and they'll work through it. Extroverts may prefer something less structured. That might at first appear to you, as a leader, easier. But you, of course, may need to jointly impose structure or risk them not sticking to the remit in the first place. All of the other rules of delegation are relevant, but considering the level of structure in the way you delegate will help you to get more from your team. Ask questions and help introverts create the structure if there's none already in your mind. So in conclusion, considering the way you help your team structure tasks may help you to get more from them. What would you like to know about introversion in business? This week's question comes from Peter, and it's echoed by a discussion I was in on Monday evening. Are introverts more or less confident than extroverts? It's a great question, so thank you, Peter. It's also important for leaders, as introverts often appear to be less confident than their more extroverted colleagues. That makes it easier for leaders to justify passing them over in promotions, delegation, or just day-to-day interactions. But is it true? And why does it appear to be the case? I think there's a couple of factors here. If I'm feeling de-energized, I'm likely to appear less energetic, outgoing, and confident. So as an introvert, if I've spent a lot of time with people, I'm likely to be de-energized. And number two, if I stop and think through a question to give a better answer before I speak, I may appear less confident than somebody who immediately espouses an answer, even though it's not as complete and quite often self-contradictory, as extroverts tend to talk to think. So there's a couple of reasons. But what is confidence? In a general sense, it's the feeling that you have faith in or rely on someone or something. Self-confidence could be explained as a belief that your chosen course of action is the right choice and that you can properly complete that action. If you're more introspective, you may often keep double-checking your potential actions, which could also appear less self-confident. But here's my point. There are introverts and extroverts who lack confidence, just as both personality types can have too much confidence. It might be useful to distinguish between inner confidence and external confidence. Introverts tend to have a confidence from their detailed knowledge of a subject. They've thought through things, giving them an internal confidence. That's not the same as confidently handling interactions, an external confidence. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that introverts can't perform on stage, lead groups, or entertain. They'll prepare and work for it, then recover their people energy afterwards. So are introverts less confident? No, I don't think so. If you're a leader wanting to understand somebody's confidence level, probe a little more deeply and see what's inside. What question would you like answered on the show? Whether you want to be on the show or just have your question answered, go to activateyourintrovert.co.uk where there's a box for you to ask your question. You could also follow on Facebook and discuss the answers at the show's page, Activate Your Introvert. If there's a particular introvert myth you'd like explored, or issue that stops you getting the most from the quieter people in your team, let me know. The mission of this show is to help you understanding introversion and building business. But now it's time to chat to Vic. Welcome, Vic.
Hi, John.
How are you doing?
I'm really well. It's great to be back.
It is, isn't it? So you're one of our favourite guests.
I'm your favourite today.
Absolutely. Just before we start talking about burnout, can you just remind the listeners, are you an introvert or one of those strange extrovert creatures?
I am an extrovert. I'm not strange. It's just because you, as an introvert, don't understand me.
But on a serious note, what does that mean to you?
Extrovert to me means I need to be with people to get my energy levels up. You know, I need to be plugged in to other humans is where I get my energy.
Thank you. Now, we were talking about burnout. Is burnout where you kind of strike a match and everything catches fire, or something else?
Well, recognizing burnout is key, because I think some people think of burnout, or some people think that they're just depressed and actually that they just need to get some antidepressant. Some people just feel out of flow, and some people actually hit a wall. I've heard people say, "Oh, well, burnout, isn't it just when you've had a really hard week on a Friday, you need to go and lie in a bath on a Sunday?" It's like, no. Burnout is much deeper than that. And it doesn't mean that somebody is unhappy. Burnout is not about being unhappy. It's recognizing what burnout is for you. And I did that at the beginning of April, actually. I realized I had literally struck the match and was about to set fire, and I needed to slow down. But I was a really great place for my business. I was happy. Everything was going really well. But what I've realized in this last year of lockdown is the fact that I've actually become a slave to my phone. And I thought I literally have been on my phone since the beginning of lockdown. Yeah. Whereas before we were in lockdown, if I was running a workshop, I wouldn't be on my phone. I wouldn't check my social media on my phone for, like, maybe I'd just at lunchtime. Yeah, I felt that in lockdown, I'm constantly on social media. I felt this real pressure to be on social media, to really market my business, to just be on. Every time there was a comment, I needed to jump on that comment and reply to that comment and do this and do that, and to the stage where actually social media burnt me out.
So that's quite interesting. So my first thing was going through my head, because I've spoken to lots of people who think that introverts are more likely to burn out because they're introspective and they reflect a lot, which I'm looking at your face as we're talking. I'm agreeing with your face, because I think that's a load of old poppycock. However, there are people that think that. So it'd be interesting to unpack that. That's point number one. Second thing that's quite interesting is it that you were just spending too much time and energy focused on something, which, let's be honest, I've done it too. Must reply on social, and the very act of all that concentration is just exhausting? Or is it, in your case as an extrovert, you weren't getting the energy from being people, or a combination?
Oh, well, no, that's interesting. I haven't thought of it as being my energy levels, but it's absolutely, like you say, a load of poppycock. Introverts and extroverts, we can all get burnout, and it can happen in so many different ways. And to me, it's when you go out of flow. Yep. So we are working to, and we both run our own businesses, and we run our businesses to the way that our subconscious core values want us to run our business. We do it the way we want to do it. Yeah. If you were in perhaps a corporate role somewhere, would you be doing stuff that actually goes against your core values, but because they're subconscious and you didn't realize, you weren't aligned to them, you suddenly go out of flow? And when we're not working in flow and we're working out of flow, yes, that can happen 1 or 2 days. But when we constantly work out of flow, it will cause us to hit what we call burnout, because we're working against ourselves. We're working under pressure all the time. We're working in a stressful place all the time. Anxiety brings, and what worries me at the moment is the amount of people who have got anxiety about returning to the workplace. Actually returning to the workplace is not for everybody. We need to give our people, our employees, the human race, flexibility and choice about when and where we return to work.
Really interesting. Again, it's one of those things where right back from the first lockdown last year, when you and I had a discussion where people are going, oh, lockdown is the time of the introvert. And I said, rubbish. Yeah, exactly. Well, you remember it too. And so it's not just that extroverts are loving to go, the idea of going back to the office then, and introverts are going, no, thank you, because introverts like to socialize as well, but it's the change in patterns and the stresses that come with that, which is making people worry about return to the office. Okay. Sorry, I interrupted you while you were talking about burnout.
No. It's about being out of flow. So some days, we could go out of flow. So our style would change because our environment impacts how we behave. And if something's happened where we've gone out of flow, like there was no milk in the fridge, so you couldn't make a brew in the morning, and one of your kids has got a home school because there's been a positive case, and actually then there's temporary traffic lights, or the train was like, all those little things that can take us out of flow. Yet for a day, our behaviours might change for a day. And we accept that people change for a day.
But it's quite interesting then, because I was writing about that the other day, something I call perceptual narrowing, where I'll give you a really silly example of it in a second, but whereas we get more stressed, the things we notice around us, we perceive less around us. So our behaviours change as a result. But this really silly example is because as we perhaps approach a barrier that we're driving the car and we come up to one of those barriers that prevent trucks from going into estates, and suddenly what do? We know the car fits through, and yet we all slow right down. And yeah, I can almost understand people that hunch up their shoulders to try and fit through that narrower gap as well. Or in my case, I was running along a towpath the other day in a pair of shorts, and I'm suddenly running along there going, oh, it's as if I'm trying to avoid all the weeds, when I know if I walk along that same path, there's not a problem at all. It's as if I'm sitting there going, do I get fatter as I go faster or something? But no, it's just my perception of what's going on because I'm concentrating on other things.
Yeah. And when other things that trigger us, so when things that trigger us to go out of flow, like I say, that cause us stress and under pressure, we accept when people's behaviours might change for a day, and we can recognise it going, oh, you're a bit more demanding today, or you're a bit quieter today, or you're a bit this or a bit that. And when it's like a day, that's acceptable. Yeah, we just appreciate that. We can recognise burnout if the people around us or ourselves are doing this on a daily basis. So say like if someone said to you, oh, John, you're a lot more demanding than you normally are. You're louder than normal. You're more extroverted today. And they say it to you several times. You then need to actually sit back and reflect and go, why is this? But you might also recognise that you're doing it yourself. Why is this? Is this a sign that I'm actually starting to burn out? And what is it? Like I say, my business was great. I've got some great clients. I love what I do. But actually, screen time was burning me out.
So if people start to ask you more often than normal, or suggest to you that you're changing your behaviours in some way, or you notice that you're changing your behaviours in some way, just almost stop and do a mental check and ask yourself if that's the problem. And what's the best thing to do if you suddenly go, actually, yeah, I am starting along that burnout path? What should you do?
Look at what it is that's causing that pressure. So as I said, mine was the constant need to be on social media. Yeah, the need to reply to everything. And I found what I did was I actually deleted all my social media apps off my phone. And it was like, I felt liberated. I felt like this weight had been lifted.
Lovely feeling that, isn't it?
Oh my God, it's amazing. And even now I've got them back on my phone, but when I loaded them, I clicked don't allow notifications. So my phone doesn't ping at me.
Oh, I hate notifications. Everything I've ever got has got all notifications are turned off, and always have been. We are starting towards the time when we need to say goodbye. But just before that, a couple of quick questions. We're talking about people behaviours and introversion, extroversion, how well do you think leaders and business owners understand them?
I don't, in all honesty, just
And
from
what,
the work that I do.
and what's the result of that in business terms?
By not understanding them, it's reduced productivity, it's conflict in communication, it's all of those things that actually don't make business flow.
Whether not recognising people's behaviour, you don't see them getting burnt out, or whether you just don't encourage them and help them to behave in the best way possible for them.
Yeah, when you can recognise it and when you can understand people's behaviours, then communication can ease and conflict can reduce and productivity can increase. And with increased productivity, generally becomes increased bottom line. That's what most leaders and CEOs.
Absolutely, yeah. No, thank you for that. So people behaviours are important to business. I always ask my guests what a tip for an introvert.
A tip for an introvert is, at the moment we're doing everything quite often by video, is to raise your hand. If you're thinking, raise your hand whilst you're thinking, because it might not be that they might not come to you straight away, but by the time you've managed to think your thoughts and your answer, they might have moved on to something else. So raise your hand as you're thinking and make the host aware.
Remote meeting host knows that you're thinking. I like that one, thank you. And what about a non-introvert that's perhaps managing the meetings or perhaps managing people?
So perhaps the extroverts in the... The extroverts need to know that it's not all about them.
Is that possible?
There are other people in the meeting. A good meeting host will understand their introverts and their extroverts, and they will recognise the extroverts and say, Vic, that's really great, but I don't want to come to you again. I'm going to go over to John. Is that okay? So recognise the extrovert and thank them for their input, but tell them that you're going to move on to another member.
Great point. How can people get back in touch with you, Vic?
They can either email me, hello@queenofbehaviours.com, go onto the website, or find me on Instagram, the Queen of Behaviours.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been great to catch up.
Been a pleasure to come back again, John.
And now it's time for Introvert Myth of the Week. Those crazy stories that I hear and you hear that some people actually believe. After Vic's discussion, I thought it would be good to pick out one point that often comes back to me in other discussions: the myth that introverts are more likely to suffer stress or burnout. I don't see where it logically comes from, although I've heard it quite a few times. Maybe it's about introspection being interpreted as questioning one's actions rather than self-learning and development. But no, I've seen no evidence that burnout or stress is more prevalent in introverts, and nor has Vic. However, I'm going to link back to last week's discussion with Mike Pagan. Introverts may be more likely to isolate themselves, though that's not the same as saying they dislike people. In Mike's discussion about mental wealth, we talked about the importance of a strong support system of people around us, and how without that any of us can struggle. There's no reason not to have that support system, and introverts are great at fewer, closer relationships, but may not always think of developing a support team that allows you to be emotionally vulnerable with each other and supportive. So there's an action that introverts might need to take, but it's another myth to consign to the bin. Burnout is something we should actively look for in all of our employees. I'm John Baker. Thank you for listening. I hope you found it useful. There's a new episode every Thursday at activateyourintrovert.co.uk and your favourite podcast provider. Till then, go be introversial, activating your introverts, building your business.